The sun was setting on the horizon as we arrived at the campsite, a remote spot nestled deep within the woods. The anticipation had been building for weeks, and now, finally, we were here. It was a tradition for my friends and me to spend a week camping every summer, a chance to disconnect from the hectic pace of our daily lives and immerse ourselves in nature. There were 6 of us: Jason, the self-appointed leader of our group; Emma, whose love for nature was contagious; Sarah, with her endless supply of enthusiasm; Mike, the jokester; Lisa, the practical one; and me, Alex, the one who cherished these moments the most. We spent the afternoon setting up our tents, gathering firewood, and exploring the area. The campsite was perfect, isolated with a clear view of the night sky and surrounded by towering trees that rustled softly in the breeze. As dusk settled in, we gathered around the fire pit, eager to start the evening's festivities. Jason took charge of building the fire. With a few practiced movements, he had a small blaze going, and soon the fire was crackling merrily, casting flickering shadows all around us. We sat in a circle, the firelight dancing on our faces and the air filled with the comforting scent of burning wood. "All right, everyone," Jason said, rubbing his hands together. "Who's ready for some scary stories?" There were murmurs of agreement and a few nervous chuckles. Telling ghost stories around the campfire was a tradition as old as our camping trips themselves. It was a way to challenge our fears and bond over shared shivers of fright. "I've got one to start us off," Mike said, grinning mischievously. He always had a talent for storytelling, and his tales were often the highlight of the night. "Let's hear it," Emma said, leaning forward, her eyes wide with anticipation. Mike cleared his throat and began. "This is the story of the haunted lake. Many years ago, there was a small village not far from here, nestled by the edge of a serene lake. The villagers loved the lake. It was their source of water, food, and recreation. But one night something terrible happened. A young girl went missing, and despite their best efforts, the villagers couldn't find her. We all listened intently, the fire crackling softly in the background. Mike's voice was low and ominous, drawing us into the tale. The girl was never found, and the villagers began to whisper about strange occurrences around the lake. People claimed to hear her laughter echoing across the water at night, and some even saw her reflection in the lake's surface, despite there being no one there. The village was consumed by fear, and eventually they abandoned their homes, leaving the lake and its haunting presence behind. Mike paused, letting the suspense build. To this day, they say that if you visit the lake at night, you can still hear the girl's laughter, and if you're brave, or foolish, enough to look into the water, you might just see her staring back at you. There was a moment of silence as we absorbed the story. Then Jason broke the tension with a chuckle. "Nice one, Mike. That was pretty creepy." "Thanks," Mike said, grinning. "Who's next?" Sarah raised her hand. "I've got one. It's about an old abandoned cabin in the woods." She began her story, weaving a tale of a group of friends who discovered a cabin deep in the forest, only to find it haunted by the restless spirits of its previous occupants. Her story was filled with eerie details and spine-chilling moments, and by the time she finished, we were all feeling a bit more on edge. "That was great, Sarah," Lisa said, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "Now I feel like something's watching us from the trees." "Don't worry," Jason said, laughing. "It's just your imagination. Besides, we're safe here by the fire." The stories continued, each one adding to the atmosphere of suspense and unease. Emma told a tale of a cursed necklace that brought misfortune to anyone who wore it. Lisa recounted a legend about a ghostly figure that roamed the woods, searching for lost souls to claim. By the time it was my turn, the night was fully dark, and the fire was our only source of light and warmth. I took a deep breath, ready to share my story. This is the story of the Whispering Woods. It happened to a group of campers much like us who decided to spend a weekend in a remote forest. The first night was uneventful, but on the second night, they began to hear whispers. At first, they thought it was the wind, but the whispers grew louder, forming words and sentences. The others leaned in closer, the firelight reflecting in their wide eyes. The whispers seemed to come from all directions, and they spoke of secrets and warnings. The campers tried to ignore it, but the whispers wouldn't stop. They became more insistent, urging the campers to leave the forest before it was too late. Terrified, the campers decided to pack up and leave, but as they made their way through the woods, they realized they were lost. No matter which direction they turned, the whispers followed, growing louder and more frantic. I paused for effect, feeling the tension in the air. The next morning, a search party found their campsite abandoned. The campers were never seen again. But if you listen closely in these woods at night, you might still hear the whispers, warning you to leave before it's too late. There was a collective shiver as I finished my story. For a moment, no one spoke, each of us lost in our thoughts and the eerie atmosphere we had created. "Okay, that was genuinely creepy," Emma said, breaking the silence. "I think I've had enough ghost stories for one night." Jason laughed, though there was an edge of nervousness in his voice. "Yeah, maybe we should switch to something a little less terrifying." We spent the rest of the evening talking about lighter topics, sharing jokes and reminiscing about past camping trips. But the sense of unease lingered, and every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made us jump. As the fire began to die down, we decided to call it a night. We extinguished the flames, making sure the fire was completely out, and retreated to our tents. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to the sounds of the forest and replaying the stories in my mind. The night seemed darker, the woods more menacing, and I found it difficult to fall asleep. In the early hours of the morning, I was jolted awake by a sound. It was faint at first, but as I strained to listen, it became clearer. Whispers, just like in my story. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the whispers persisted, growing louder and more insistent. I unzipped my tent quietly, stepping out into the cool night air. The campsite was still, the fire pit a dark, cold circle of stones. The others were asleep in their tents, unaware of the eerie sounds that filled the air. I walked to the edge of the clearing, my flashlight in hand, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. The whispers seemed to surround me, coming from all directions. They were faint and unintelligible, but there was a sense of urgency to them. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. It was just the power of suggestion, I told myself. We had spooked ourselves with our own stories. Just as I was about to turn back to my tent, a figure emerged from the shadows. I froze, my flashlight beam illuminating a face I recognized. Jason. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, relief washing over me. "Yeah, those stories really got to me." Jason smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Same here. Let's get some sleep. Tomorrow's a new day." We returned to our tents, the whispers fading into the background. I lay awake for a while longer, but eventually exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, we woke to the sound of birds chirping and the smell of fresh coffee. The unease of the night before had faded, replaced by the warmth and camaraderie of our group. We spent the day hiking, swimming in the lake, and enjoying the beauty of nature. As evening approached, we gathered around the fire once more, but this time, the atmosphere was different. The shadows that had seemed so menacing the night before now felt comforting, and the fire's warmth was a welcome respite from the cool night air. We shared stories again, but they were of a different kind. Funny anecdotes, childhood memories, and plans for the future. Laughter filled the air, and the sense of unease was replaced by a feeling of connection and joy. As the fire burned low and the stars twinkled overhead, I realized that the true magic of our camping trips wasn't in the stories we told or the scares we shared. It was in the moments of togetherness, the bonds we strengthened, and the memories we created. And so, as the night drew to a close, we extinguished the fire once more and retreated to our tents, content and at peace. The whispers of the forest were silent, and the only sounds were the gentle rustling of leaves and the soft breaths of my friends as they slept. The next day, we packed up our campsite and prepared to head home. As we hiked back through the woods, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the experience. It had been a week of adventure, laughter, and a few scares. But most importantly, it had been a week spent with my closest friends. As we reached the trailhead and loaded our gear into the car, I took one last look at the forest. It had been a place of mystery and fear, but also of beauty and connection. And I knew that no matter where life took us, we would always have these memories to hold on to. We drove back to the city, the car filled with chatter and laughter. The stories we had shared around the campfire had become part of our collective history, a testament to our friendship and the adventures we had embarked on together. And as we parted ways, promising to do it all again next summer, I felt a sense of contentment and excitement for the future. The world was full of mysteries and wonders, and with my friends by my side, I knew we could face anything that came our way. In the end, it wasn't the scary stories or the eerie whispers that defined our trip. It was the bonds we strengthened, the memories we created, and the realization that no matter how frightening the world might seem, we were never alone. And so, as I lay in bed that night, thinking back on our week in the woods, I smiled. The firelight might have faded, but the warmth of our friendship burned brighter than ever, lighting the way for all the adventures yet to come.